Hello, everyone. It's me, David Chen. Sorry, we took a little second for this to start up just now. Uh, I'm here with Melissa Taminga. Melissa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay.
It's Sunday, September 13th. It's been a while since we've done a broadcast. Uh, that's not to say the pace of news has slowed down, though.
No,
News,
what's
arguably, the
up?
pace of news has
Anything.
actually increased.
I think so.
So
Yeah.
we usually just do these broadcasts just to check in with each other, see how things are going. So I will start by asking, you recently had one of your children go back to school, right? Or all three of them, or
Yeah. So my oldest is basically out of school and she's just thinking about college, which we're probably going to wait for another year. But the next two, so I have one who is going to be doing Running Start, which is basically you're a high school student, but you're taking classes at the college. Although she still kind of has a toe in at the high school as well.
Mhm.
And then our youngest, who is in junior high, she started this week. Yeah, so that was kind of a major thing in terms of like our summer has sort of it ended whatever our summer was, and now we're
Yeah.
sort of in school mode, and we're still kind of trying to figure out what that means exactly. But that was sort of a major thing that happened this week.
And how's that been going?
Um, it's been going okay so far. I mean, I think I'm a little bit more encouraged than discouraged so far, although I'm sort of just I feel like I can't quite predict how it's going to look like in the long term. But I think at least in terms of how it's going for our family, in the sense that we do have a lot of privilege in the sense that right now I'm at home, and when I do start working, I'll continue to be at home. So I'm sitting at my desk right now, and my daughter just has her desk set up right behind me. So when she is doing her junior high work, I'm just kind of right kitty corner from her, so I
Yeah.
can kind of help facilitate that. And she kind of likes it so far. I mean, she's definitely said she wishes she could be back in person, but I think for her, at least at this point in the newness of it all,
Yeah.
she's kind of, I think, enjoying the sense of feeling like she has control of her own space. And she's, in her home, I'm right here. And then she's interacting with classmates and teachers, from that kind of secure position, which in some ways is kind of a nice soft landing for starting junior high.
Yeah.
So I do feel like I'm kind of encouraged on that level, but I am also seeing sort of the writing on the wall in other ways. And in the sense that, doing Zoom for an 11-year-old, which her days are kind of be from like 9:15 to about 1 with a few breaks in between. She'll be on live Zoom classes
Yeah.
with her teachers. And then she's supposed to have an afternoon basically where you're working on homework. And that will be 4 days a week. And then on Wednesdays, it'll basically be all asynchronous. So she can just have a homework day. So I feel like they're really trying hard to make it so it's not constantly sitting at the computer. It's
Right.
really just a morning of work, where you kind of have to be really tuned in. But I can already see that is going to get difficult, for students. And even I'm just feeling for the
And,
teachers. And
and it just started, right? Like it's
it just
it just
started.
started, and you're already
Right.
like,
I'm
this is
already like,
this is gonna go
yeah,
badly in
yeah.
like
It's
3 weeks from now.
exactly. So it started Tuesday. And so we haven't even really had that much actual homework. It's been a lot of like, how was your summer, and those kinds of things, and let's figure out Zoom. And you can kind of see the teachers trying to figure out how that works and everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not even really in the midst of it yet, and I'm already just kind of feeling like this is going to be a challenge. And I mean, given again the fact that we have so many privileges just in terms of our space and what our family situation is like, and we don't have home insecurity or food insecurity or any of these things, and I'm already feeling the challenge of it. I just honestly cannot imagine how other families are managing if parents are gone. I mean, how their kids are even able to sort of figure out getting on and making sure
Yeah.
they're on time, and all of those things. And if they even have a space to do schoolwork. I mean, we're fortunate enough in that we have like a school room that I basically sort of set up where we're going to be working.
Yeah.
But just many families don't even have that. So you're sitting at a kitchen table, or if there is even a kitchen table.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be so, it's just going to be a really tough year for everybody. Um,
Jonathan Pike in the chat says, "My mom's a teacher, little one, second grade. She tries to encourage them to get out and stretch during their break, but it's challenging. She can only
yeah,
do so much through the screen."
yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah, I can't even really imagine what it's like for people who have children in any grade level. Like, it seems like
Yeah,
there's
challenges
different
at every grade. Yeah,
different grade levels have different challenges, right? Like at the younger
exactly.
grades, it's about like um, this is what I assume. You correct me if I'm wrong because you actually have kids at all ranges, right? But I would assume
Yeah, except for elementary.
at the younger grades, it would be about like actually just like cognitive emotional development, right? Like just
Yeah,
like basic things that you get from being around other people that like you're no longer getting, and also like
exactly.
being able to focus on a
Yes.
Zoom call for 60 minutes. Like I can barely do that now,
Yeah,
and
I
I'm in my
know.
30s.
Yeah,
And then at older ages, I
exactly.
would think it's like the challenge is you're kind of missing out on some of the more formative experiences that many people have, like going to prom or, you
Yeah,
know, looking forward to going to college and becoming part of the workforce or whatever it is.
exactly.
You just don't have that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think, and my one of my daughter who is going to be doing Running Start. I mean, she's doing one class at at the high school right now, so she basically will have she just logs on for one class in the mornings, and it's choir. So just choir. I mean, the thing that she loves, which is being in a group of people and
Yeah.
singing. I just hear her like in her room, like doing vocal exercises, and it's so sad. I mean, because the whole point of choir, right, is to be where you're hearing each other's voices and you're in this community, and that's
How does
just
it like
kind of
work? Does
gone.
everyone like record their own audio track? Like, is that how they're gonna do it, or?
I think that there is going to be some of that. I mean, right now, I think the teacher is just sort of she's doing vocal exercises, and that's the only thing that students hear. And then in your own room where you're muted, you're doing your exercises. And but then I think she has have some plan where students will record something and then they'll send it to another student, and they'll eventually sort of mesh all their voices somehow together.
Mm,
I don't know exactly. I think she's still kind of trying to figure it out too. My daughter said she has plans coming through, but she hasn't seen them yet.
yeah.
But yeah, for her in terms of high school, I mean, she just kind of had just a mini breakdown last night. I mean, she's been doing so well, but she just like talks about how lonely she is, and
Yeah.
she's like, I stay up until 3 a.m. on TikTok, and she's like, I know it's bad, but I'm just so lonely. And it's just, yeah, I just feel for these kids.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I wish you the best, Melissa, during this challenging time, and I hope that like, I trust that your kids have an awesome mom who's doing everything she can to like shepherd them through this very challenging time. Um,
yeah, I'm
is
trying my
there?
best. It's just like feeling like it's not enough, right? And then I
Yeah,
haven't even started teaching yet. So
yeah. I was gonna say you're starting teaching in like a couple weeks, probably, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
like 10 days or something.
Wow. Um, so this last week, I've been thinking. I thought a little bit about like 9/11, right? Because the anniversary of
Yeah.
9/11 happened. I read this piece in the Atlantic. I'll put it up in the screen here from the Atlantic called "The Grief Americans No Longer Share."
Mm.
Also in the chat, Matt Goney says there's a good daily podcast featuring a choir teacher worth finding.
Mm.
So maybe something you should
So
check
check that
out.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's the grief Americans no longer share. As the anniversary of 9/11 arrives, a splintered nation lacks the collective resolve it once showed. Now, I don't know that I completely agree with everything in this article. Like,
Mm.
it's basically like when 9/11 happened, like we had this like collective grief that we all shared, and like we like resolved to move forward as a nation, and we've basically lost that. Like America's in a like, and this author or writer Garrett Graff kind of takes that as a sign that um, like America has lost something of its collectivity because of that fact.
Mm. Sort of a
Um,
communal.
yeah, some kind of communal situation. Here, quote, the tragedy of 9/11 had a certain purity. The definable evil of terrorists killing innocent civilians interrupted amid their morning routine, and the first responders who rushed to their rescue. On that day and on every September 11th since, Americans have vowed never to forget that loss. The current pandemic may have a different outcome. As historians have resurrected stories of the 1918 flu pandemic, many Americans have been surprised to learn of it for the first time. Coming at the end of World War I, that cataclysmic largely vanished from the nation's civic consciousness. In the years ahead, Americans could wish to forget the COVID-19 pandemic. The deaths of 2020 wiped from our national memory in shame, an embarrassing chapter in which our government failed us and we failed our fellow Americans, end quote.
Mm.
So, a couple of thoughts on this. I mean, despite the fact that, like, he frames like the nation's collectivity as like a positive, and
Right.
really terrible things happen in the wake of 9/11 that like
Hmm.
we got involved in wars that we are still in to some degree, and
Yeah.
there was like huge rise in anti-Muslim sentiment and hate crimes
Hmm.
and those kinds of things, and so it's like I don't really know that like America's reaction to 9/11 showed us at our best. But
Right.
what
I
I will
completely agree.
say,
Hmm.
is that like I was, I've been thinking a lot about how for the last couple decades, it's just been every time it's 9/11, it's like we remember
Right.
hashtag never forget,
Never
like all this
forget.
stuff, and it occurs to me like I don't feel like we have nearly that level of attention being devoted to all the people we've lost in COVID-19. Like,
Yes, exactly.
given the magnitude of the loss, like compared to it's several orders of magnitude higher in terms of number of people dead.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not several orders of magnitude larger in terms of like how much we've been asked to mourn for these people in the public,
Yeah.
and it just struck me how much the media and our government plays a role in our collective mourning.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Hmm.
they have like, as far as I can tell, virtually large swaths of it have abdicated that role.
Right. Not
In
even
the
acknowledging it, really.
certain, I don't know. It's hard to make like generalizations because it's like,
Yeah.
we you and I read the things we read, and maybe there are other places that do acknowledge it, right? But like, it doesn't feel like it to me. I mean, that's we read a
Yeah.
lot of things, and it doesn't feel like we're like in the slow motion process of grieving 200,000 dead. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Exactly. Hmm.
But I don't know how you feel about it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like there were certain moments where, for example, it was the New York Times, right, that printed, was it we passed the 100,000
Yeah.
death mark, right? And that felt like, okay, are we going to like finally have some kind of collective larger acknowledgement of that? It seems like there have been moments like that, but there isn't this kind of leadership where we're gathering around where we are kind of acknowledging the kind of horror of that. And I'm wondering, I mean, as you're talking about 9/11, I was just thinking about how, I mean, it seems like America as a country, we gather around these kind of myths about who we are, right, and our greatness. And it seems like there were things about 9/11 where, like you said, we had what people perceived as defined enemy against the great nation of America, and we had like heroes that we could pinpoint right from the outset of that. The firefighters, which again, and not to diminish any of that heroism, but it seems like that was a sort of an event that was defined and specific, and there were heroes. And in some ways, even though it was an attack on us, we were able to like gather around and say, we're going to make the myth of America and like emphasize how great we are and that we have this military might and we're going to fight back and we're going to collectively like mourn this. And it seems to me that with COVID-19, partly because we've failed so much,
Yeah.
we don't even want to mourn or acknowledge it collectively because that would admit it doesn't fit into our idea of
It's
ourselves, the
like
myth
too
of ourselves.
cognitively dissonant to really
Exactly.
be a thing. Yeah.
Right.
Because it would be like yeah. I mean, your formulation, which I agree with,
Mhm.
implies that like there is nothing we could have done to prevent 9/11 from happening,
Right.
right?
Right.
But like, I mean, what I'm saying is, I agree that that is why we have been mourning COVID less, but I don't agree that there's nothing we could have done to prevent 9/11, obviously.
Oh yeah, no, I
Um,
wasn't saying that. I'm saying that's kind of the narrative
yeah, that's the
almost though.
narrative. I agree. I agree.
Yes.
I agree. So
And that we've gathered around that myth of what even it was. Whereas we kind of ignore the failures that we could have prevented it, and then we ignore the really horrific response, and
Yeah.
we just sort of gather around this idea of how it shows, first of all, that we were attacked and we're gonna be great, and we are great, kind of a thing. And I think that the COVID-19, the pandemic, is harder to harness and ignore the problems
Yeah, I
in
don't
some
doubt
ways.
that that's a huge part of it, but I
Hmm.
wonder like if there's anything else behind it, like if
Mm.
there's anything, so that's a huge part of it, is that like basically what you're saying is that our mourning all the people who died collectively would be like an acknowledgement of the vast failures that our system has perpetrated, and we don't want to do that. Like we as American
I
people
think that's part of it.
don't wish to look ourselves in the mirror and do that. And I think that's very
Yeah.
valid. But I'm like,
Hmm.
is there? I wonder if there's anything else. If there's any other reason why. Part of it, I think, is that the deaths have happened so quickly, and are so vast that it's almost like incomprehensible. Like there's no
The numbers are too
easy
big.
way to
Yeah.
actually do the mourning. Like
Hmm.
when you know
And
uh,
every day it's happening, like a
every day it's
thousand people a
continuing to
day.
happen. It's not over. It's not over yet. That's is
Right.
one of the challenges too,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, there's also, when you compare sort of what the world of information was at the point of 9/11, I mean, there was still kind of splintering off, but now we're at a point where people are attached to different news sources. And so I mean, we have well, most people acknowledge that that 9/11 happened. Um, but the, we have people who are essentially in denial right now that there is even a pandemic happening,
yeah. Oh
or that
yeah.
it's as bad as it is.
Another great point. Yeah, which brings us to this other piece that
Yeah.
I think has been going around the internet and it's really pretty. Oh, whoops! Sorry, no, didn't mean to do that. No, there we go. Sorry, I'm still mastering the art of using this broadcast system. Um, it brings us to this other piece that was in Time magazine, and it's entitled "How Conspiracy Theories Are Shaping the 2020 Election and Shaking the Foundation of Democracy." Now, this is a really distressing piece.
Hmm.
I just gotta, some of the leads on these pieces are really, really impressive. This
Yes.
one's written by Charlotte Alter, and she writes, Kelly Farrow is a busy mom on her way to the post office. Leather mini backpack, brunette top knot, turquoise pedicure with a matching ombre manicure. A hairdresser from Kenosha, Wisconsin, Farrow didn't vote in 2016, but has since become a strong supporter of Donald Trump. Why does the news hate the president so much? She says. I went down the rabbit hole. I started doing a lot of research. When I ask what she means by research, something shifts. Her voice has the same honey tone as before, and her face is as friendly as ever, but there's an uncanny flash as she says, this is where I don't know what I can say, because what's integrated into our system, it stems deep, and it has to do with really corrupt, evil, dark things that have been hidden from the public. Child sex trafficking is one of them. Farrow may not have realized it, but she was parroting elements of the QAnon conspiracy theory, a pro Trump viral delusion that began in 2017 and has spread widely over recent months, migrating from far right corners of the internet to infect ordinary voters in the suburbs. End quote. So, yes, this QAnon, I'll just read the next sentence because it really explains what QAnon is. He says, QAnon's followers believe President Trump is a hero safeguarding the world from a deep state cabal of Satan worshipping pedophiles, Democratic politicians, and Hollywood celebrities who run a global sex trafficking ring, harvesting the blood of children for life sustaining chemicals. So just want to, that's kind of what it is, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And the piece goes on to say like a large quantity of people are starting to believe this. I want to ask you this question,
Yeah.
which is like on your Facebook page, like people
Hmm.
you follow or are friends with on Facebook. Have you seen people in your circle, in your family, kind of parroting some of the QAnon stuff yet?
I mean, nothing as explicit as kind of what you just read about the blood
Yeah,
drinking, but it's like I feel like I'm seeing the edges of it or the pieces of it, so that they're not really even necessarily aware
right.
that it's connected to something
Have
like
you seen
QAnon. So
people advocating against like sex trafficking or things like that?
yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
100%.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
it's these kind of like in these conservative evangelical circles, I'm seeing a lot of the kind of save our children hashtags, or even it's not the hashtag, it's like an article about sex trafficking in some way. And so there seems to be among those circles this kind of collective anxiety and paranoia related to child sex trafficking that I can only be that was never there before.
Yeah.
So it seems like it does have to be tied to, at least tangentially, to the QAnon conspiracy theory. And there, I think in is probably wholly unaware of that connection.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then it also ties into the kind of the other sort of lines of thinking that they do, that liberals are evil, Obama is evil, Hollywood is evil. And so it really does tie into this idea that those people are dangerous. And so, of course, like the link then to child sex trafficking is a pretty easy link to make, whether they're making that explicit link or not, that, Hillary Clinton is running a sex trafficking ring. But they do believe that she is evil and Obama is evil,
Yeah.
and they need to be stopped.
So
So it's really
you
not a
haven't seen
far
like
jump.
you haven't seen like liberals are harvesting the blood of children to drink adrenochrome, but you have seen these people are evil and they're likely involved in sex trafficking.
Well, not even like they don't even go that
They don't even go
far.
that
But
they
I'm
don't even make
saying
that jump,
there,
but they'll be like
yeah,
these
not
people are
yet.
evil, and as a separate observation, evil people do sex trafficking, and like
Yeah,
you make the
exactly.
connection yourself,
Yeah,
basically.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's very much like that, and it really plays into this kind of conservative media narrative that, I mean, Rush Limbaugh has been doing for years, but of course Fox News too. That where you're painting sort of anybody on the left as they're really evil and they want to destroy America. So it's not a very far leap to say, well, this is another evil thing that they're doing, because they already believe that the left, the liberals, whatever, are evil, like genuinely evil.
I saw this article by David M. Shell entitled "Why Are Conservatives Obsessed with Pedophilia Right Now?" And he draws a really good analogy. He says
Mhm.
that he watched this movie called Footloose, right? And he says here in the article, Peter Quill. Have you seen Footloose, by the way, Melissa?
I've seen Footloose,
Okay,
yes.
so he watched Footloose, and the Peter Quill from Guardians of the Galaxy, the Marvel film, describes Footloose as follows: a great hero named Kevin Bacon teaches an entire town full of people with sticks up their butts that dancing is the greatest thing there is. David Shell continues, the town has banned dancing because they think it's part of what led to the death of several of the town's youths. But Kevin Bacon comes along and wants to change the law and have the town council allow dancing. At some point in the movie, one of the townspeople stands up and says this critical line: "It won't be long before every community standard is violated." That was it.
Yeah.
I wasn't even looking for it, and there it was. I paused the movie to sit
Yep.
in the incredible eloquence of that sentence. All of a sudden, I understood why conservatives are sharing articles about child sex trafficking, especially about powerful progressives. It's because it won't
Mhm.
be long before every community standard is violated. And then he
Yeah.
continues, child sex trafficking is the very end of morality. It is beyond the
Mhm.
pale. It's difficult to think of anything worse. Sexual abuse next to murder is considered the worst thing there is, and some might even rank it higher than murder. The only thing that could possibly be worse is if the victim was a child. Um,
Yeah.
so it's the logical, like you literally cannot think of a worse crime, right,
Yep.
than
Yep.
child sex trafficking.
Yep.
And by weighing in against it, and then also like now there's a crazy theory out there that asserts that Hollywood liberals and Democratic politicians are like involved in it. You link
Mhm.
these two things together,
Yep.
and hopefully it's going to be enough to elevate Donald Trump for another 4 years, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you do the kind of, I think I've mentioned this book to you before, but Kristen Kobes Dumais is a history professor, and she wrote this book called Jesus and John Wayne: How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation. I'm reading it right now,
Yeah.
but it's one of the things she's doing is she's tracing kind of the roots of really how we got to Donald Trump. And one of her basic premises is essentially that Donald Trump is not an anomaly, but he is more like an outgrowth of exactly
Yeah.
the kinds of things they've been attached to for many, many years. And one of the things that she talks about is the way that so much of these conservative evangelical movements have to do with patriarchy and family order, the traditional family values and that kind of thing. And that idea of, and there's a lot of talk of purity and sexual purity. And if you maintain the specific family order where it's father, mother,
Yeah.
children, that is part of protecting like sexual purity of the family and then by extension of the nation. And so it's hard not to connect kind of that kind of narrative and those kind of values, and see the long line and tradition of that, of how these kind of white evangelicals have been inundated with that idea of what is true and what is right,
Yeah.
and what is pure, and then connecting it to, well, the progressives are trying to disrupt our family order.
Yeah.
They want to put our kids in daycare and have the state teach our kids. They want, they want bathrooms for transgender people. They want, they're for gay marriage. So it's all connected into this, like, if you disrupt this order that we have set out as sort of the epitome of what's pure and noble and good, and it's related to sexual purity, then it seems to me that there is a really strong connection to this idea of, like, well, the natural thing then would be child sex trafficking.
Yeah.
I mean, they would think, I think, see as liberals of, like, well, of course, that's what liberals want to do. That's what they've been wanting to do the whole time, is disrupt the family order. And that leads to child sex trafficking. So
it is a challenging thing to combat this
yes.
this conspiracy theorizing for a few reasons, right? Like, number one, because they've positioned themselves as, like, we are on the side of, like, anti-sex trafficking. If you,
Yes.
like, argue against whatever conspiracy theory they are a part of, they will just target you as somebody who is for child sex trafficking, which actually happened
Exactly.
this weekend, actually, with Ted Cruz and Mark Harris. I don't know if you saw that
Oh,
unfortunate exchange.
yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're defending a piece of art, you're for child sex trafficking.
Or not even defending a piece of art, like, against conservatives who, like, tout conspiracy theories about child sex trafficking, right? Like, just like,
right.
hey,
If you're not for this conspiracy theory, you're for child sex trafficking.
correct.
Yeah.
And that it's very difficult that, like, no, I'm actually against child sex trafficking. By the way, what you're doing right now is hindering the cause of anti-child sex trafficking. I am against.
Right, literally, yes.
I am against this idea of you using child sex trafficking as a cause in a very craven, cynical fashion in order to generate support from your base by propagating further conspiracy theories. But that's too nuanced for Twitter. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
It's too nuanced, not even for Twitter, but for, like, local news, like,
just
a lot of local news coverage about, like, anti-child sex trafficking, like, covering it very credulously,
Exactly.
It is difficult to fight this conspiracy theorizing rhetorically. Just, like, it's hard to have the tools to do it.
Yeah.
It's very devious.
There's not the space for the nuance. And then I think when you have people who are, like, already perceiving you as the enemy, there's not really a space for listening to what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
And it kind of come back to that, the time piece that you were talking about with how conspiracy theories are shaping. I mean, it says the facts that should anchor a sense of shared reality are meaningless to them. The news developments that might ordinarily inform their vote fall on deaf ears. They'll not be swayed by data on coronavirus death. They won't be persuaded by job losses. They're impervious to messaging, advertising, or data. They aren't just infected with conspiracy. They appear to be inoculated against reality. So it's how do you have a conversation with someone who is really you don't have a shared reality. You can't use data. You can't use logic. There's no listening. So I was just feeling so depressed about it this week, because it just seems like, I don't know how to fight this.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the things that we were taught to use to fight it, as you just read, are useless, right? Like, there's nothing you can really do. I talked recently about, like, epistemic closure on one of my podcasts, Culturally Relevant, and one of the things that someone said, so epistemic closure, this guy, I think it was a guy named Julian Sanchez, I believe, that coined it. But it's the idea that basically, like, your knowledge system prevents conflicting facts from taking root, right? Like
Mm.
whatever your belief system is, anything contradictory to it, you have something that can prevent that from taking hold. So,
Yeah.
hey, 200,000 people have died. Oh, well, it's fake news. Like the media is out to
Right.
get Donald Trump. It's all
It can't be
lies.
true.
It's all lies.
Hmm.
It's not even true.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
Donald Trump has been impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. Oh, well, that's just the deep state. Like
Right.
it's the deep
Yep.
state that doesn't want him to succeed. And it's like all these things
Hmm.
kind of overlap, and they're like working in concert with each other to basically prevent people from shattering their worldview, and it's very, very difficult
Yeah.
to break it. But one thing this guy says, and he was just riffing. The guy who coined the phrase, he wasn't even like this is a solution. He's just like maybe this will work. Is like
Uh-huh.
sometimes these beliefs can be brittle, right? And what he means by it, they
Hmm.
can be like wide reaching, but they can be brittle, meaning like if something contradicts. If you find a piece of something like incontrovertible evidence, it can quickly send the entire thing tumbling down, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
it can
Yeah. So if you have the one
if you have one
thing
thing
that
that's
they
like
can't contradict.
yes, yes. And for many people, it will be a close family member
Yeah.
suffering or dying from the coronavirus.
Yeah.
That's a sad truth.
Something that
Yeah,
impacts them
yeah.
personally, and deeply.
That deeply impacts them, but that like it contradicts their beliefs about
Yeah.
what they're being told.
Right.
I don't
Exactly.
know what that could be in the case of QAnon, though. Like I don't
Yeah.
know what
I don't
could
either.
be.
Yeah. I don't
So
either.
it's not like there's a truth we can all point to and say like, hey, look at this truth. Like it contradicts all that you believe. Because if there was a truth that fit into that category, we've already have done it.
We'd be, yeah. Right.
If
Exactly.
you were the
Yeah.
inventors of Facebook, you'd have invented Facebook.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway,
Well, and then, I mean, then we have, yeah, social media and YouTube, where, I mean, not only are they not kind of running up against data regularly that might contradict that, they're constantly being given data, quote unquote, that confirms whatever it is
right? You're
that
saying
they,
like our social networks reinforce these beliefs in general. Yeah,
yes, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
who knows what's going to happen? But you know what?
Mm.
I've started to make I'm starting to make peace with the fact that like I think a lot of us are hoping that this election will bring about a lot of change, but no matter who's elected, we're going to be dealing
Yeah.
with these issues for years.
We are.
The
Yep.
conspiracy theory stuff, it's going to continue, and
Yeah.
we got to start thinking of ways to deal with it. So
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's so tempting to kind of think that an election will solve all
yeah,
of this, but
yeah,
yeah, I mean, what the 2016 showed us is that yeah, this is no, this is a symptom of things that are already here, and it's only being exacerbated. So yeah, I think I too have had to sort of think about what does this mean for the long term, because I have to think of it in terms of a marathon. Not just a sprint. We'll get to November or January and then we'll be okay.
I've been seeing this belief online, like people fear that like our lives will never go back to quote unquote normal again. That like
Hmm.
for many
Hmm.
people, their experience of life was like largely consistent for the last couple decades,
Yes,
and that
exactly.
like, hey,
That's
is
such
that
an
ever
important
coming
point.
back? And I think that like
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that, but I guess my reaction to that is maybe for a lot of people it never felt normal.
Yeah,
Um,
I think
and
that's right.
those are the people who are like
Hmm.
voting for Trump right now, maybe
Yeah. Yeah.
or that these people, yeah, these people, many of them religious believers, as you've indicated, have been like. Actually, this came up uh, in this newsletter I read by David Farrier
Hmm.
about like why is it that religious people seem to be able to accept QAnon so easily?
Mm.
And he says here, he writes in his newsletter Webworm, which is a great newsletter that like kind of documents conspiracy theories.
Hmm.
He says that part of the reason people are slipping into QAnon is that there's a whole generation raised on on 80s satanic panic and 90s evangelical and Pentecostal Christianity. Their minds are already
Yes.
primed for this idea that a giant cosmic battle can be a reality. Their brains accepted it
Yes.
once, they can accept it again. QAnon provides all the same story, that there's this giant battle happening here on Earth between good and evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you and I can speak to this, Melissa, because you and
Hmm.
I,
We both grew
we
up.
both grew up in
Yeah.
Christian church, right? So like,
Hmm.
certainly growing up in Christian church, it was very much framed as you are like, you must take arms against the forces of evil,
Yeah.
right?
This
Even
is
in
a
a
battle.
relatively like moderate church, like that is the
Yeah.
language that is used because it's the language from the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it seems part of it is like, hey, QAnon offers you as a Christian the opportunity to, hey, to take arms against evil, and what could be more evil than child sex trafficking?
Child.
There's literally
Right.
nothing
Exactly.
worse.
Hmm.
Do
Yeah.
you feel like being a Christian predisposes you to believe in conspiracy theories like QAnon because of
I
how
mean,
Christians have been conditioned throughout their lives?
yeah,
Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I think, well, I will say, I mean, a specific version, at least of American Christianity that I am familiar with,
yeah,
like the white evangelical conservative Christianity that I grew up in. It was very, I mean, all of this right now just does feel so familiar. I mean, the kind of fear, the you're going to be attacked, even you need to fight against these various elements of pop culture, whether it's movies or music or books or whatever it is, and that's like a part of this battle that we need to be a part of. I mean, the framing of that, absolutely, and that ran through all of the kind of Christian circles that I was a part of growing up. And I guess I can't speak to broader Christendom, and especially like the Black Church in America and that kind of things. But certainly the sort of white evangelical spaces that I grew up in, that they're very much primed for that kind of thinking. I mean, that it speaks to the popularity of the Left Behind series, right? Where
yeah.
there is like, you're thinking about the end times and you're really primed for all of that, like in your day-to-day life. I mean, I grew up thinking like every day, like, are we going to be raptured today? Am I ready? Have I like done enough
Yeah,
today?
yeah,
Have I like shown that I'm battling the forces of evil today in my life right now at my school? you know,
yeah.
have I like not listened to that Metallica song or whatever? So no, it's really like that
Yeah, yeah,
specific.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, certainly that kind of thinking. I just see direct ties to that, and that the way that the brain patterns run, and what you're afraid of. It seems like all of the same things
Yeah.
to me.
Anything else you want to talk about, Melissa?
Oh, anything else we want to talk about? um, well, we
Have
could.
you have you been consuming any medias?
Well, on the light note, I guess it's kind of a light note. I mean, I will say our family, over the summer, we have been, I think I told you about this. We were watching Marvel
Yeah,
movies.
you're going through the
We're going through all the Marvel
MCU. Yeah,
movies. Yeah. Which for me, I was just kind of piecemeal, only seen some of them, but it was our youngest, our 11-year-old, that really wanted to watch them all. So I'm like, okay, my students, my college students have seen all of them, and I'm like, this would be a good opportunity for me to do that. So it actually has been interesting to interact with them, both with my kids, but then also kind of thinking about why are these movies so meaningful and powerful, and why are so many of my students just really passionately attached to these movies. So I think on that kind of bigger level, it's just interesting to me to kind of think about, why did MCU, like the superhero movies, take such a hold on culture? I mean, is it something about myth making? Is it something about providing security, escapism, in a world that feels increasingly um, insecure? So I think that's just been kind of interesting. But it's also been interesting to work through the Marvel movies from like my older daughters are like just so angry at the sexism of the movies, which they see everywhere.
uh
They're
huh.
just so annoyed. And then my younger daughter is like, what? Like, these are great, So it's kind of like my teenagers are like, no,
What
you
is an
shouldn't like
example
the
of the
depiction of
sexism that
that.
they see?
Well, I think, okay, so Tony Stark is a major part of that, right? And I know that it's not necessarily always endorsing, right, his behavior and his sexism, but they just get so frustrated by the kind of throwaway comments and the ways that he's kind of constantly talking about women.
Hmm.
And that, so I think they're just really frustrated by like, and then then it's a world where really it is, you have you have Black Widow and a couple of major women figures, but for the most part, it is kind of a male dominated world. So not only do you have like a male dominated world, you also have like this key figure in the Marvel universe who is constantly having this running commentary that's witty and funny and yet is constantly like objectifying women, or sort of like seeing that he sees women as sort of throwaway figures, which again they have they are nuanced enough to know that that the movies aren't necessarily saying this is a figure to look up to, but on the other hand, he's charismatic and witty and funny and everybody likes him. And
I
so
feel like that was really true in Iron Man 1, but I don't.
they've seen it more through the other movies as well.
Huh. I don't
And
recall it as much in the subsequent Iron Mans. Or if
yeah.
he was very dismissive, he was like equally. It seemed like he was equally dismissive of his male peers. But
hmm I think they just feel the impact of it more. I mean, it will often be just a throwaway comment. We're like, "Oh yeah, that was the time I blah blah blah. What were you?" Or he won't. Or
yeah,
there was like that journalist that he slept with, right?
right.
And then first of all, they were annoyed that that even happened, that a journalist would even do
It is
that.
a tired trope. Yes.
Right. And then that he didn't even really remember her in a later movie, right? It
Mm,
just kind of felt like
yeah.
an indication to them of just sort of this larger world that they feel kind of diminished by. So it's been interesting, I think, interacting. Like I think at that age, I certainly wouldn't have had really the nuance to think about it that much or notice it or be even angry by it. But I think, but they are. Um,
You're training him up well, Melissa. You're training him up
I
well.
hope so.
I've been watching The Boys recently on Amazon Prime. Have you heard of that show?
Okay, I've heard of it. I haven't seen any of it.
I think it's a great show because it's the only show on TV I can find right now
Hmm.
that, like, we have so much superhero shows on TV right now, right? Like
Yes.
you have Agents of Shield, you have all the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like dozens of films. You have
Hmm.
like the DC universe, like Arrow, Flash, like Supergirl,
Hmm.
all this stuff. And The Boys, out of literally all that content, The Boys is the only one that presupposes, what if getting superpowers didn't actually make you super benevolent and kind?
Uh-huh.
It actually
Uh-huh.
made you even more of an asshole. Like,
Mm,
what if people?
interesting.
Because
Hmm.
and what I think from the fact that there's very few shows like The Boys out there is that, like,
Yeah.
we like to be comforted by the idea that, like, if people have power, they will use
Yeah.
it for good. Because to
Right.
consider otherwise is to feel helpless and
Hmm.
to feel that the world is unjust. I think this is why, a lot of the people who become indelible superheroes like Batman are billionaires, or they are people of means,
Mm, right.
because we want to think like, oh, the billionaires are kind. Elon Musk
Hmm.
is a good person. Like, people like to
Right.
feel that way because it's
Hmm.
like, well, if he got there by, if he's a billionaire and he's a bad person, like, that would be, not only does that mess with my sense of justice, but like, how did he even get to
Yeah.
that point? Like,
Right. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so
Well,
it,
that's interesting. I mean, thinking about the American dream too. I mean, that I sort of feel like that the idea that you start, poor and then you work your way up and then you'll be wealthy and also good and powerful. I mean, it
yeah,
sort of seems like that's kind of implied that, once it's almost like this moral, the wealth is attached to morality, and something that actually says, well, actually, the more wealth you gain, perhaps you won't be heroic or moral with that. That's not, I think, again, a narrative that Americans really particularly like very much.
there is this movie called Incredibles 2. Did you see that movie?
Hmm.
And there's a villain in that movie called Screenslaver.
Hmm.
And I mean, I didn't care for the movie that much. I thought it was like not nearly as interesting or well done as the first one,
Hmm.
from a script perspective. But the villain of the movie, Screenslaver, who's like a tech person, he does give this monologue that I just, when I was watching it, I was like, this is chilling. He said, I have the monologue, I pulled it up here. He says, quote, "Superheroes are part of a brainless desire to replace true desire with simulation. You don't walk, you watch talk. I'm sorry, you don't talk, you watch talk shows. You don't play games, you watch game shows. Travel, relationships, risk, Every meaningful experience must be packaged and delivered to you to watch at a distance so that you can remain ever sheltered, ever passive, ever ravenous consumers who can't free themselves to rise from their couches, to break a sweat, never anticipate new life. You want superheroes to protect you and make yourselves ever more powerless in the process. Well, you tell yourselves you're being looked after, that you're inches from being served and your rights are being upheld, so the system can keep stealing from you, smiling at you all the while. Go ahead, send your supers to stop me. Grab your snacks, watch your screens, and see what happens. You are no longer in control. I am. Um,
Wow. Yeah.
I'm like, this is one of the villains. I'm like, this guy has a point. Whoops, sorry. This guy has a point, you know?
Right. He does. Yeah. The
But
good villains always do.
unfortunately, it never really goes anywhere. Um,
Yeah. That's
so anyway,
fascinating.
those
Hmm.
are are the not to end on a bright
To
note.
end on a right note.
Those are our thoughts
Let's
on superheroes and what's happening in the world today. Anything else you want to say, Melissa, or shall we wrap it up?
we could talk about like the apocalyptic smoke and fires that are happening, but maybe we should try to end on a happier note. I don't know. Not going outside today.
Yeah, we're not going outside today. We're broadcasting
Yeah.
instead. All right. I hope people in the chat across the various platforms we're doing this have appreciated this chat in some way or this conversation in some way. And hope everyone's staying safe, fighting in a non-violent way for the forces of rationality and public health, and wearing a mask, respecting people's boundaries, doing what you can to protect yourself and your family. Thanks. You can follow Melissa at One April Day and check out more of our conversations at youtube.com/uncertain times. We'll try to keep broadcasting every now and then to keep you updated on what's happening and how we're thinking about it. All right. We'll see you later.